A royal toast ended in murder. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Comment your city. I enjoy every note. Wolfe unwraps the palace's darkest gift. Christmas at the brownstone doesn't believe in surprises. Wolfe believes in orchids, beer, and the truth, in that order. And none of them improves with tinsel. His only seasonal indulgence is letting Fritz pin a sprig of holly over the dining room lamp. So when the doorbell rang at 11 on the morning of December 23rd and an unannounced visitor brushed past me like she owned the place, the routine cracked. She was tall and quick, dressed to be noticed without begging for it. White coat, hat with feathers that had seen better days, and eyes the color of winter sky. The face was familiar from billboards. I got up to intercept her, but she was already headed for Wolfe's chair, and I'm not built to tackle famous women before lunch. Wolfe didn't rise. He regarded her as if she were a sentence he hadn't asked to read. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, voice brisk as a gavel, "I am Bianca Queen." In New York, her name is often a resume. Bianca Queen had been the Merchants Association's Christmas mascot for 3 years. Miss Yuletide on floats in hospital wards, beside store windows stacked with toys. She'd married money, divorced it, and kept the attention. Seeing her in our office was like finding a party in a monastery. "Archie," Wolfe said to me, "you will inform Miss Queen that I do not receive visitors without appointment." "Tell him yourself," she said to me. I had an appointment with Trouble, and it got cancelled by a corpse. That bought her a sliver of interest. Wolfe lifted his brows. "Explain." She sat, but not in the red leather chair for clients. She chose the yellow one by the door. "Last night," she said, "the Queenside toy drive. The papers call it a gala. It's war with sequins. I chaired it. Without me, the association wouldn't raise enough to buy a rubber duck." "The president," Wolfe prompted. "Malcolm Rourke. He was to announce the beneficiary at midnight. Instead, he was dead at 10:45 in the coat room. No blood, no shout. He sat down as if he'd remembered an errand and never got up. The doctor said heart failure. The police said they wanted to talk to me." Her mouth went thin. "So I left before they could. Not because I'm guilty, because they're stupid." "Why come here?" Wolfe asked. "Because Rourke died holding my scarf." She opened her handbag and produced a silk scarf, crimson with tiny gold snowflakes, folded like evidence. "They found him clutching this. I hadn't seen him all evening. A bellboy handed it to me and said maybe I dropped it. I didn't. Someone planted it to make it look like I was in that room." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. He dislikes being used, but he despises careless staging more. "The police know what you think. I didn't stay to educate them. Lieutenant Garvey thinks a public charity queen is an easy ornament for his theory. He'll hang me on a tree if he can." Her chin lifted. "I need you to find who pinned that scarf on me, and why Rourke chose to die with it in his fist." From the kitchen came Fritz's clatter. Wolfe heard it too. Habit tugged him toward lunch. Curiosity tugged him back toward the woman who had walked in trailing frost. "Miss Queen," he said at last, slow and exact, "you have disturbed my morning and my household. I will not be manipulated for your convenience. Yet your predicament is not impossible, and your intelligence seems superior to your judgment. You will remain here. Archie will collect facts uncontaminated by your emotions. If I accept this matter, it will be for my reasons, not yours." She let out one sharp breath. "Fine. I don't care why. I care that you do." "Then we understand each other," Wolfe said. He turned to me. "Archie, telephone Inspector Kramer." I got Kramer on the phone before Fritz could remind us that roast goose waits on no mystery. Kramer sounded like a man whose Christmas spirit had been strangled with a wire. When I told him Wolfe wanted him at the brownstone, he asked if a bomb had gone off in the plant room. I said no, just pressure in the office. He grunted and promised to come within an hour. Wolfe sent Bianca up to the south bedroom, polite as a bouncer. Fritz brought coffee. Bianca took hers black and sat like a woman used to spotlights and allergic to waiting. I took her through the gala again, getting times and faces while Wolfe listened. The toy drive had been at the Eastbridge Hotel. She arrived around 7:30, scarf on, coat checked by 8. At 8, she spoke. At 9, posed with Santa and reporters. Then worked the room. Rourke, she said, was grandstanding in donor country. She hadn't spoken to him after her speech. At 10:45, he was found dead in the coat room, seated as if resting, her scarf clutched in his fist. The doctor called it heart failure. Lieutenant Garvey called it a case. Who could get into the coat room? I asked. Bellboys, manager, Malcolm, maybe the association staff, she said. People drifted in and out. Names close to him? Junie Rourke, his wife, Calvin Nettles, the treasurer, Portia Lansk, a donor he crossed, my handler, Lila Hart, and the coat check girl, Bess, last name unknown. Wolfe opened his eyes. When did you last see the scarf? At the coat check. I didn't touch it after 8. Then we require Bess, Wolfe said. And Miss Hart. Provide addresses. Bianca spread empty hands. I left without my program. The association won't talk to me while Garvey is chewing my name. Telephone Miss Hart, Wolfe said. She did, twice. Voicemail. I called the association and got a receptionist who said Lila Hart had left early yesterday to help at the hotel and hadn't come in this morning. We assumed she was recovering, she added, then stopped. Bianca's composure cracked for an instant. She kept smoothing her skirt, a nervous habit under the polish. Wolfe noticed too. His stare sharpened, not at her, but at the empty space her assistant should have filled all night long. Wolfe's voice went cool. Miss Queen, remain upstairs. Archie, we will proceed without you. I grabbed my coat, already smelling Eastbridge panic. Wolfe stopped me. Bring Saul Panzer. Calling Saul this early meant the game had tilted. I phoned him, got his quiet yes, and was putting the receiver down when the doorbell rang again. Kramer came in, leading with his shoulders, snow on his hat, and annoyance in his eyes. In the office, Wolfe offered him a chair. Kramer preferred to stand. Garvey says she vanished. She is here, Wolfe said, as my prospective client. You will not trouble her. She needs to answer questions. Later. Now you will supply your report on Malcolm Rourke's death. Kramer sat. Rourke was found alone. No sign of struggle. His pockets were tidy, except his phone was missing. The coatroom door was unlocked. There's a service corridor behind it, and a staff elevator to the basement. The manager swears only employees use it. He snorted. The medical examiner will do the autopsy this afternoon. Garvey's been leaning on the board and on Bianca. Anything else? The coat check girl, Bess Talley, 19, never showed to give a statement. Her supervisor says she left right after the body was found, crying. They can't reach her either. Wolfe's fingers touched. 2 absences. Convenient. Archie, go to the Eastbridge and locate Miss Talley. Saul will meet you. I will try for Miss Hart. Kramer, tell Garvey that interference with my inquiry will be answered in kind. Kramer's mouth twitched. You mean you'll embarrass him? Yes, Wolfe said. Now go. Saul was waiting in the Eastbridge lobby when I got there, looking like a finance clerk who had misplaced a decimal and didn't want anyone to know. The lobby was dressed for Christmas with enough red velvet to upholster a battleship. People talked low with brittle cheer. We went to the service corridor behind the coat room. The door was shut and a security man was planted there. I showed him my license and said I was working with Inspector Kramer. He let us through. The coat room was a narrow cave of hangers and steam heat. Empty racks stood like picked bones. A woman in a gray sweater sorted claim tickets with a jaw set for blame. She introduced herself as Mrs. Peskett, the supervisor. Her eyes flicked to the chair by the wall. That's where he was, she said. Mr. Rourke, like he'd sat to check a label. Then the girl screamed. "Bess Tally?" I asked. She nodded. Bess was on the inside desk. I was out front. When the scream came, I ran in, and he was there clutching that scarf. Lieutenant Garvey told her to wait in the staff lounge. She did. Then she vanished. I didn't see her leave. "Any reason she'd bolt?" Saul asked. "She's a decent girl. First big charity job. She was upset, that's all." I asked who had been in after 8. Guests drifted in and out. Mr. Nettles came twice. Mrs. Rourke once. Miss Lansk stayed the longest, arguing with Malcolm. The door was open. She hesitated. And Miss Hart came in near 10. Said she had to check on Miss Queen's wrap. She stayed 5 minutes. That was a brick in the wall. I asked for the staff lounge, and we took the stairs down. The lounge smelled of burnt coffee and wet wool. 2 bellboys were on their phones, pretending not to listen. The house detective, a man named Harlow, met us with a smile. "Police already took statements," he said. "We're not police," I told him. "We're looking for Bess Tally." Harlow sighed. "She isn't in her room. We tried her emergency contact. No answer. We pulled camera feeds. She left by the service elevator at 11:10 last night, coatless." "Coatless in December," Saul murmured. "Either running or expecting a coat somewhere else," I said. "Show us the corridor camera." He led us to a security office. The tape showed the coat room door. Around 10:35, Calvin Nettles, narrow-shouldered in a tux that fit like a loner, went in and out fast. 10:40, Portia Lansk swept in with a hard face and stayed the length of a cigarette. Donce Ti 50 Junie Rourke drifted out, blotting her eyes. At 11:05, Lila Hart came down the corridor in a green dress carrying a garment bag. She went in, left at 11:10 without the bag, turned toward the service elevator, and vanished. 10 seconds later, Bess Tally came out, looking around, and hurried the same way. That was the end of the film. "Elevator camera catch them?" Saul asked. Harlow shook his head. "Out for a week, parts on order." "Where does it come up?" I said. "Basement loading bay, side entrance." I stared at the frozen corridor. 2 women, one in evening green, one in coat check black, disappearing through the same blind spot right after a man died. It wasn't elegant, but it was a line. Back in the lobby, I called Wolfe. He listened without interrupting. "Miss Hart and Miss Tally departed together," he said at last. "Find their destination. I will do what I can here." "Any luck on your end?" "Not yet, but I have acquired something that may be relevant. Return when you have an address." I pocketed the phone. Saul's pale eyes were on me. "We start with Tally's home," he said. "Yeah, and somebody met them at that side entrance." Bess Tally's address was a Chelsea walk-up that smelled of onions and old paint. Saul and I climbed 4 flights, knocked, got nothing. Saul knocked again. Still nothing. A door across the hall opened. A woman in curlers looked us over. "You want Bess? She ain't here." "Was she here last night?" I asked, showing my badge. "After 1. Came in fast, no coat, eyes red. 5 minutes later, she went out again with a tall lady in green. A black sedan was waiting downstairs." "Plate number," Saul said. She laughed. "I don't collect those." Outside, I called Wolfe. Tally got home after 1, then left again 5 minutes later with Lila Hart. Black sedan. "Good," Wolfe said. "Find the car if possible. I have news about Calvin Nettles. Return when you can." We rode toward Midtown and started with Hart's address, which the association receptionist gave up once Saul sounded like he might be carrying a writ. Hart lived on West 60-something in a building with a doorman who wore his tux like armor. He said Miss Hart hadn't come home last night. I asked about other places she might go. He offered nothing. An elderly tenant stepped out as we talked. She peered at us. "Are you friends of Lila? She was tense yesterday. Said Mr. Nettles was pushing her into something improper at the gala, and she meant to stop him. I told her not to tangle with bored men. That drew a hard line to Nettles. I phoned Kramer for his address. Got it with a growl. And 10 minutes later, Saul and I were on Riverside Drive at a pre-war palace. Calvin Nettles opened the door in shirt sleeves, face pinched. His eyes flicked the hall as if checking for shadows. "Mr. Nettles," I said, "Nero Wolfe wants a talk." "Wolfe?" "I have nothing to say to him." "You will," Saul said. "We're looking for Lila Hart and Bess Talley." They left the East Bridge through the service elevator around 11:10, then left Talley's apartment after one with a black sedan. They haven't surfaced. Nettles went pale. "I don't know where they are." "Then you won't mind if we look for your sedan," I said. "I don't own a car." He snapped too quickly, then stared toward the inner hall. A flinch is a loud noise. "We can stand here while Garvey decides you're hiding witnesses," I said. "Or you can let us in." He sagged and stepped back. The apartment was expensive and strangely bare. On a side table sat a gold clutch purse with a little crown clasp. Nettles saw me notice it and half reached for it. "Lila's?" I asked. He nodded, defeated. "She brought Bess here. Said the girl was scared. I let them stay an hour. Then a man came for them." "Describe him." "Older, a hat, scarf, gloves. Didn't take them off. Lila called him Mr. Rourke's lawyer. I didn't believe her." "Did he drive the black sedan?" "I think so." "Where did they go?" He shook his head. "I don't know. But Lila said if anything happened to her, tell Bianca she was sorry." That line didn't sound like theater. It sounded like fear. I called Wolfe from the foyer. He didn't waste breath. "Bring Nettles to the brownstone," he said. "He will be useful. And Archie, be alert. Something at home has been tampered with." Saul's eyebrows lifted a millimeter, his version of shouting. In Nettles's coat closet, I spotted an empty hanger with snow melt on the floor beneath it, as if a heavy overcoat had just been yanked off. On the foyer console lay a hotel claim ticket, Eastbridge stamp, number smeared by a thumb. Nettles tried to pocket it, failed, and muttered that he hadn't gone near the coat room. We took it anyway. On the way out, Saul murmured, "He's scared of someone with access to staff elevators." When we got back to the brownstone, the front door was ajar. Not wide enough to scream burglary, just wrong. I nudged it open and listened. Fritz was in the kitchen with his radio low. Wolfe's voice came from the office. "Archie, bring Mr. Nettles in." We did. Nettles hovered by the yellow chair like a man waiting for a verdict. Wolfe sat in his throne, hands folded, eyes alert. On the desk to his right lay a small tin of saffron, its lid off. "Mr. Nettles," Wolfe said, "you are the treasurer of the Merchants Association. You're also a man who is lying to me." Nettles licked his lips. "I haven't lied. I told your assistant—" "You told him you did not enter the coat room after 8. Wolfe touched the claim ticket I had brought. "Yet you have a ticket. How did you obtain it?" I lost my coat. I went to look for it." "Before the death?" "About 10:35. I couldn't find my ticket, so I went inside to check. That is consistent with the hotel camera, but you did not mention it." "Why?" "Because Garvey thinks I'm embezzling," Nettles blurted. "Malcolm had been breathing down my neck for weeks. He said donations were missing." Wolfe nodded faintly. "How much?" 50,000, give or take. Cash gifts in envelopes. Malcolm claimed I skimmed them. I didn't. Who did? I asked. Nettles spread his hands. I don't know. Lila thought Malcolm was shifting money to punish Bianca. He hated her getting the spotlight. Miss Hart told you were being pushed into something improper, Wolfe said. She said Malcolm was forcing her to stage Bianca's fall. I don't know what she meant. Then she brought the coat girl here. Bess said she saw something in the coat room. Before she could tell me, that man came. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Describe him again. Nettles repeated it. Older, neat, gloved, hat low, voice clipped. If he was Rourke's lawyer, he didn't dress like one. Wolfe leaned back. Mr. Nettles, you will remain available. Archie will drive you home later. Now, Archie, the saffron. I looked at the tin. What about it? It was moved. Yesterday it was in the spice drawer. This morning, Fritz found it on my desk with the lid ajar. Fritz does not handle my spices. Neither do you. Therefore, someone entered this room and handled it. Fritz appeared in the doorway, offended. I would not, he said. Also, the drawer was not locked when I checked. My stomach tightened. Wolfe keeps that drawer locked. If it had been open, someone had a key or a knack. I'll check the locks, I said. Do, and telephone Saul Panzer. Ask him whether any black sedan has visited Mr. Nettles' building often. I went to the hall cabinet for the spare key ring. The hook was empty. The ring should have held 3 keys, including the one for Wolfe's private drawer. I stared, then went back in. The spare ring is gone, I said. Wolfe didn't blink. When did you last see it? Yesterday afternoon. Right there. Then our visitor was not clumsy. He took what he required and left the saffron as a signal, either contempt or warning. Or he spilled it while hunting for something else, I said, peering into the tin. A few threads were missing, not enough for cooking, enough for a sample. Wolfe's mouth turned down. Yes, a sample. Archie, we may be dealing with poison masquerading as natural death. He let that hang, then said to Nettles, you will inform no one of this conversation. If you do, I will deliver you to Lieutenant Garvey with a bow. Nettles swallowed and nodded. Fritz took him upstairs. When we were alone, Wolfe said quietly, someone needed Rourke dead and Bianca discredited. Someone also needed keys to my house. We will learn why those needs intersect. Saul called back in less than half an hour. No plate yet, but he had a habit. A black town car had been parked across from Nettles' building 3 mornings this week, and yesterday evening it cruised past our block twice. The driver was gray-haired, walked with a limp, and wore gloves even to smoke. Saul would keep on him. Wolfe absorbed that without a blink. A man who watches both Nettles and me is not casual. Archie, you will go out. First, Portia Lansk, then Junie Rourke. I want their accounts. Kramer will give addresses. He nodded toward the hall. But before you leave, deal with our door. The locksmith Wolfe had called was waiting downstairs, a little fellow with a clean kit. He examined the front lock, the office door, and the cabinet where Wolfe keeps the spare ring. No scratches. Either he had keys, he said, sir, or he's very good. I can change cylinders today. Do it, I said, thinking about the missing ring in the open spice drawer. Bianca was upstairs, pacing the guest room. She turned on me. Any word on Lila? Nothing solid. We're tracing a car. She wouldn't run. She's loyal. Loyal to who? To me. To the work. Malcolm treated her like furniture, but she stayed. He said he had a file that could ruin me. Lila told me it was bluster. Did Malcolm say anything odd last night? He stopped me near the bar about 9:30. He was giddy. He said the association was about to be purified. Then he walked off. He hated that donors listened to me more than to him. I left her with Fritz and called Kramer for addresses. Portia Lansk lived in a Green Street loft that looked like a gallery. She opened the door in a robe and no patience. Yes, I was in the coat room, she said. Malcolm froze my foundation out of the toy allocation. I confronted him where there were no microphones. Who else was there? Calvin Nettles, jumping at shadows, and Lila Hart. She came in with a garment bag and was surprised to find me. Said she needed Bianca's coat. Malcolm told her to wait. Then he told me to leave. Portia's mouth tightened. He was sweating, not sick, like a man about to spring a trap. Any talk of Bianca? He called her useful until she wasn't. He despised her popularity. If he meant to humiliate her, he'd do it on camera. Did you suspect him of skimming donations? I suspected everybody. Malcolm liked power, but he liked money too. As I left Portia, her intercom buzzed. She ignored it, but I caught the name on the display, Calvin Nettles. Either he was frantic for allies, or someone wanted her reminded to keep quiet carefully. Junie Rourke was on Park Avenue, with a doorman who frowned at my shoes. I got inside by saying Wolfe needed her help to clear Bianca. She met me among lilies and silver frames, eyes pale but steady. Malcolm asked me to the coat room, she said. He said he'd discovered betrayal and would expose it at midnight. Then he sent me out to fetch his phone. When I returned, he was dead. Did you see anyone leaving? No, only the coat girl screaming. Did his heart ever trouble him? Never. He jogged every morning. She twisted her handkerchief. If he died of his heart, it was convenient. He told me he could make or break careers. He enjoyed that. If someone wanted him silent, making it look natural was clever. The word clever sat there a moment too long. I thanked her, stepped back into the cold, and called Wolfe. Portia says Rourke was about to spring a trap, I told him. Junie says his heart was strong and somebody was clever. Wolfe went quiet, and I knew the board was filling up. I got back to the brownstone as dusk settled on the snow. The new lock cylinders clicked cleanly when I let myself in, and that felt good for about 3 seconds. Then I saw the look on Fritz's face in the hall and knew we were still bleeding. In the office, he said softly. Inspector Kramer is there. Kramer was planted in the red leather chair, hat in his hands, eyes on Wolfe. He looked like a man who had swallowed a plum pit. Autopsy's prelim came in, he said before I could sit. Rourke didn't die of heart failure. He died of a glycoside, something like foxglove or oleander, slow enough to mimic a heart attack. He was dosed maybe an hour before he dropped. Wolfe nodded once as if confirming arithmetic. Thank you. You will convey to Lieutenant Garvey that the death is homicide, and that Miss Queen is not to be molested without my consent. Kramer snorted. That'll go over sweet. Garvey's got a warrant lined up for her apartment already. He will delay, or I will embarrass him. Kramer rose, half amused despite himself, and left. Wolfe turned to me. You have spoken to Miss Lansk and Mrs. Rourke. Report. I gave him the threadbare version. He listened, fingertips tented. When I finished, he said, Rourke intended an exposure at midnight. He was poisoned, perhaps, at 9:45. The venue for poisoning is uncertain, but the coat room is pivotal because it provides privacy and an exit. We require the missing phone and the missing women. Saul. Saul stepped from the alcove. My man followed the town car, he said. It went from Nettles's building to the Eastbridge loading bay at 1:10. A woman in green and a young woman in black got in. They drove to a townhouse on East 71st. The driver used a key. He stayed inside half an hour, left alone, then circled this block. He's parked now on 10th Avenue, watching. East 71st, Wolfe murmured. Whose house? Owned by a charity lawyer, Elias Morano, counsel to the association. Quiet man. Not on your list. He is now, Wolfe said. Archie, telephone Morano. Inform him that he will bring Lila Hart and Bess Tally here within the hour. If he refuses, you will invite Inspector Kramer to fetch him. I called. Morano answered after 2 rings, voice smooth as warm milk. When I delivered Wolfe's invitation, it cooled. Mr. Wolfe has no authority. He has influence, I said, and Inspector Kramer has handcuffs. Choose your transportation. A pause. Very well. I will come. Not alone, I said. With the 2 women. Another pause. Longer. They are upset. But yes, I hung up. He's coming. Good. Now fetch Miss Queen. She must hear what I will say. Bianca came down in a dark sweater Fritz had found, hair pinned back tight. Her eyes went straight to Wolfe. You found proof. We have found homicide, Wolfe said. And a poison that could be carried in a spice tin. Do you possess digitalis, oleander, or any cardiac glycoside? She blinked. No. Did Rourke possess a reason to threaten you with a file? He said he had pictures from my first marriage. Nothing illegal, just ugly. I told him to swallow them. He smiled like he'd already eaten. Wolfe's lips thinned. Then he used the threat as leverage on others. We will discover on whom. The doorbell rang at 7. I went to open it. Morano entered in a camel coat, carrying a briefcase in one hand and a woman's fur in the other. Behind him came Lila Hart and Bess Talley, both pale, both avoiding Bianca's eyes. Morano closed the door carefully, and I noticed his gloves were still on. He smiled at Wolfe, but it was a clerk's smile. Wolfe said, mild as a banker, Mr. Morano, you have trespassed in my home. Sit. Morano sat with a stiffness that wanted to be dignity. Lila and Bess waited by the sofa until Fritz, at Wolfe's nod, guided them down. Bianca stayed on her feet, arms folded. Wolfe spoke to Bess first. You screamed when you found Malcolm Rourke. Why did you then run? Bess's hands twisted. Because I saw him earlier. Mr. Rourke came down the service corridor with Mr. Morano. They argued outside the coat room. Mr. Rourke said, no more delay. I'm ending it tonight. Mr. Morano said it wasn't safe. They went in together. A few minutes later, Mr. Rourke came out alone, looking tired, and sat in that chair. I thought he was sick. When he went still, I panicked. Morano started to speak, but Wolfe lifted a finger. Miss Hart, why did you take Miss Talley away? Lila's voice was tight. She told me she'd seen Mr. Morano with Malcolm right before he died. The police were pushing her, and Garvey was circling Bianca. Mr. Morano said he would handle Bess privately. I didn't trust him, but I didn't know where else to go. Truth is your concern, Wolfe said. Miss Hart, you removed something from the scene. Lila pulled a phone from her purse. Malcolm's. It was on the coat room floor by the chair. I grabbed it after the police left. He'd been using it as leverage. There are photos of Calvin Nettles with cash envelopes and a recording of Malcolm arguing with Mr. Morano about missing donations. Malcolm said he'd expose it at midnight. Wolfe held out his hand. He didn't turn the phone on. He watched Morano's face drain. Mr. Morano, Wolfe said, you escorted Rourke to the coat room near 9:45. You urged delay because he was about to expose you. Expose me for what? Morano snapped. I advised the board. For theft, Wolfe returned. $50,000 in cash gifts vanished under your supervision. You altered receipts and steered suspicion toward Nettles. When Rourke discovered the fraud, he threatened to surrender this phone to police. Morano's eyes darted to Bianca. Conjecture. No. The medical examiner found a cardiac glycoside. Such poison can be carried in grains. Yesterday you entered my home, stole my spare keys, and sampled my saffron to see if I kept something that might reveal your method. Your gloves, your limp, and your surveillance are the habits of a practiced offender. Bianca stared. You broke into Wolfe's home. Morano said nothing. Wolfe went on. In the coat room, you offered Rourke a drink, tea or brandy, already laced. He left you dosed but walking, and later collapsed. To redirect suspicion, you placed Miss Queen's scarf in his hand. You removed his phone but dropped it. Miss Hart recovered it. Then you spirited 2 witnesses out through the service elevator. Neat, but not neat enough. Saul shifted toward the door. Morano saw it and let his shoulders sag. Wolfe nodded to me. I called Kramer. We have Elias Morano here, Rourke's phone, and 2 witnesses. Poisoning. Come now. Kramer arrived fast. Morano went quietly. After the door shut, Bess sobbed into Lila's shoulder. Bianca sat down at last, white-faced. Fritz brought coffee no one touched. Lila wiped her eyes and told Wolfe quickly that Malcolm had forced Morano to return the missing money before Christmas, and that Morano had promised her a promotion if she kept Bianca pliant. Bess nodded at that, ashamed. Wolfe absorbed it, then had Saul escort the two women upstairs to wait for Kramer's statements. The house settled again, but it felt like a chessboard after a sacrifice. Wolfe leaned back. Christmas is when men disguise appetite as charity. The disguise is bearable. The appetite, when it turns predatory, is not. He looked at Bianca. "Madame, you will pay my fee. Next year, choose your associates with more discrimination." I gave her a grin. "And maybe keep your scarves on your neck." Kramer was still in the office when Saul brought Lila and Bess back down to sign their statements. The inspector's manner had shifted from bulldog to accountant. He asked short questions, listened to longer answers, and looked annoyed that Wolfe had spared him days of legwork. When he was satisfied, he took Morano's briefcase and left with a promise to keep Garvey from chewing on Bianca in public. The brownstone exhaled. It had been holding its breath since Bianca barged in, and now the air moved again. Fritz drifted toward the kitchen like a sailor sighting shore. Bianca remained in the red leather chair, turning the silk scarf in her hands as if it were a small animal that might bite. "I'll pay," she said to Wolfe. "The association will too, once they realize you saved their Christmas pageant. I suppose Calvin is cleared?" "Not cleared," Wolfe said. "Exposed. There is a difference. He will face questions about his bookkeeping, but not of murder." She flinched. "And Junie?" "Widows often prefer silence," Wolfe said. "She will obtain it." Bianca looked at me. Lila risked her job for me. "She risked her conscience," I said. "Jobs are cheaper." Lila colored and tried to smile. Bess kept her eyes down. Wolfe dismissed them with a nod. Saul took them out through the hall. When they were gone, Bianca rose. "Malcolm was a brute," she said quietly. "But I didn't want him dead." "Of course not," Wolfe said. "Dead men pay no reparations." She told Fritz goodbye in a voice that had softened around the edges, then swept out, scarf back at her throat where it belonged. The door closed, and the house was ours again. Wolfe sat a moment without speaking. I could tell he was tallying the costs. A day of orchids lost, a drawer lock violated, the awareness that someone had walked through his sanctuary with impunity. Then he turned to me. "Archie, you will search the street for any residue of our visitors' surveillance. I do not intend to be observed." "That ship sailed," I said, "but I'll see if he left a wake." Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the sidewalks glazed and the Christmas lights sharp. 2 blocks down, a town car idled at the curb, empty. Either Saul had spooked the driver, or Kramer had taken him in. I noted the plate anyway and walked on to be sure no other car was loitering. There wasn't any. Whatever remained of Morano's scheme was scattering. Back inside, Fritz had dinner ready with the relief of a man regaining his kitchen from trespassers. Wolfe ate in silence for the first minutes. I let him have that, then said, "You were right about the spice. I'm still not crazy about a guy sampling your saffron." "It was not saffron he sought," Wolfe said, cutting the goose precisely. He sought confirmation that I possessed a substance capable of exposing his fraud. "Meaning you think he used something he thought you might recognize?" "Yes. Digitalis is a rustic poison. A lawyer who fancies himself sophisticated might choose it, imagining that a gourmand would overlook its cousin in the spice drawer." I chewed. So Rourke almost cleaned house and got cleaned instead. "Rourke's motive was not virtue," Wolfe said. "It was dominance. Morano's was fear. Neither is rare. The rare thing is when fear imagines it can outwit intelligence." He dabbed his mouth. Kramer will recover the missing funds, I expect. The children will receive their toys. The association will rehearse indignation and continue. The world will call that justice. And you? I will call it dinner. We finished eating. Fritz looked happier with every plate he cleared, and by dessert, the brownstone had regained its orbit. Outside, New York flashed and honked and kept its secrets. Inside, the orchids waited for morning, and Wolf's chair waited for Wolf, undisturbed at last. The next morning, the brownstone was quiet the way a church is quiet after a storm. Wolf had his coffee and the Times. Fritz moved with recovered cheer, and I found an envelope on my plate addressed in Bianca Queen's bold slant. Outside, the city was already practicing cheer, but inside, we preferred accuracy to carols. Inside was a check with enough zeros to make Wolf purr, and a note that managed gratitude without begging. I carried both to the office. Wolf read the note, glanced at the check, and slid it into his desk drawer. "You will deposit it," he said. "Sure. I'll also bill her for use of my standard suffering." "Your suffering is habitual, and therefore amortized." I took the hit. Kramer called. Morano confessed to the theft. He's claiming the poisoning was an accident. "An accident," Wolf said, tasting the word. "A deliberate dose is not a stumble. He speaks so because intention adds years." He says Rourke was already shaky and he only wanted to quiet him till midnight. That is another lie. "Sit, Archie. We are not finished." "More?" Rourke's threat was larger than the money. Miss Hart mentioned a file, and Morano would not risk murder for 50,000. There is an additional stake. I thought of Junie's tight paws on the clever and Bianca's talk of photographs. "You want what's on the phone?" "Precisely." Miss Hart gave it to Kramer. "I want to see it before it evaporates into evidence. Go to headquarters. Kramer will indulge you." He did, with grumbling. In a squad room corner, he let me scroll while he drank bad coffee. The photos of nettles with envelopes were there, and recordings that could toast a man's reputation. One clip, time-stamped last week, had Junie Rourke's voice in it, cold and flat. She was telling Malcolm to stop paying that woman to front the drive, that Bianca had become a liability. Malcolm laughed and said Junie should worry about her own. "Who's the woman Junie meant?" I asked. Kramer shrugged. "Bianca's the only one on that stage." "Maybe. But Junie sounded like she was talking about a secret, not a mascot." He narrowed his eyes. "You think there's another angle?" "I think Wolf will know." Back through the snow, I felt the case trying to sprout a second head after we chopped the first. Wolf listened to the recording without moving. When it ended, he said, "Junie Rourke financed Bianca's ascent to punish her husband's donors. She resented the attention Bianca commanded, yet required it. A paradox is often a rope. So Junie was tangled in the blackmail too. Yes, Rourke threatened to reveal her payments, perhaps other indiscretions. Morano used that threat to keep her quiet while he stole. When Rourke turned on Morano, Morano struck first. Junie's cleverness was not murder, merely complicity. Will Kramer go after her? He will, mildly. He prefers clean villains. Junie will retreat into widowhood and lawyers. Society allows that. Fritz appeared with fresh coffee. Wolf's mood eased at the scent. He held the cup, eyes on the steam. "Christmas is an annual exercise in selective morality," he said. "We dress appetite in pine and call it virtue so long as the lights are bright. Morano stole because he feared shame. Rourke tyrannized because he craved awe. Junie manipulated because she loved revenge. Miss Queen performed her charity because she needed to be seen. Each appetite is human. The folly is pretending they are not." He sipped, then set the cup down. "The orchids will bloom regardless of men's pretenses. That is their advantage." I stood, and my advantage is that I get to watch you say it from a safe distance. Wolf glanced at me, the corner of his mouth almost a smile. "Deposit the check, Archie. and close the door carefully behind you." I did, and the latch clicked like a period. I didn't see Bianca again, not in person. She sent flowers to Fritz, white roses, a mistake Wolfe forgave because they were for the cook, and a second check for the toys, as if money could apologize for itself. The papers ran the story with Garvey's name in fat type and Wolfe's in none, which is how Wolfe likes it so long as his fee clears. The association held its midnight announcement 2 nights late and called it a triumph. And New York moved on, with the usual shrug and a fresh headline. On Christmas Eve, Kramer phoned to say Marano had been arraigned and Junie Rourke's attorney had offered a statement about her unfortunate entanglement. I told him that phrase belonged on a lingerie ad, not a homicide file. He laughed once, then got serious. Marano's accident story was bunk. He planned the dose and the scarf. Garvey was chewing his hat, and Wolfe had earned another brick in Kramer's ulcer. That night, the brownstone had its own private holiday. No carols, no tree, no visitors. Just the 3 of us and a goose that Fritz claimed had been waiting for a worthy occasion. Wolfe tolerated a single candle at the center of the table because it looked like discipline, not decoration. The snow outside turned the windows into screens of milk. Halfway through dinner, Wolfe set down his fork. "Archie, there is a residue I would scruple to leave unexamined." "Residue?" I said, mouth full of chestnut stuffing. "Ethical residue. The case is concluded, but it has left a smear." I chewed and waited. Wolfe doesn't do speeches unless he's already written them in his head. "Malcolm Rourke was murdered," he said. "We identified the murderer. We recovered stolen money. Yet the engine of the crime was not Marano's greed alone. It was the association's mania for spectacle. They hired a queen to sell virtue, resented her for shining, exploited a young woman to manage the illusion, and built a corridor of secrecy for convenience. Marano walked that corridor to a crime because no one wished to see what was there." "Sounds like you're giving the city a lump of coal," I said. "It deserves a small one, not for sin, but for stupidity. A society that confuses theater with benevolence will breed men who steal in the dark and call it service." I whistled softly. "And a society that confuses benevolence with sainthood will breed women who can be framed with a scarf." Wolfe's eyes shifted to me. "Exactly. Miss Queen was not innocent of vanity, but vanity is not a capital offense. Rourke meant to destroy her to polish himself. Marano meant to destroy Rourke to protect his theft. Junie meant to wound Bianca to avenge a marriage. Each assumed the public would applaud whatever costume they offered. Their error was to forget that costumes slip. Fritz brought dessert, poached pears with a sauce that ought to be regulated. Wolfe put his philosophy away and ate like a man who had settled accounts. When he finished, he wiped his lips and said almost gently, "Christmas is a rehearsal of hope. It is not hope itself. One must not expect a rehearsal to deliver the performance." I leaned back, warm and full. "If you ever tire of orchids, you could take up preaching. There's a pulpit somewhere missing an elephant." He grunted. "There are no pulpits worthy of my weight. Besides, I am occupied." "By justice? By appetite?" He raised his coffee cup a fraction. "Justice is a byproduct when appetite is disciplined." Outside, a car horn bleated. Then the street went quiet. The brownstone was locked, spare keys accounted for, saffron back in its drawer. Upstairs, the orchids slept, indifferent to charity queens and lawyers. I cleared my plate, thinking how Wolfe had done it all from his chair. If that isn't Christmas magic, I don't know what is.